Welcome back to another edition of New York Got Game. It's your boy Dexter Henry. The offseason continues to roll along. We've done a lot of talking about everything in the Knicks offseason, and there's still more to talk about the Knicks team as they try to defend the title. But this week, we're bringing the fans something new here on New York Got Game. We are bringing an entirely new miniseries that we're going to do throughout the rest of this offseason, most of the offseason. And so, very excited to bring you this new series here on New York Got Game. We're going to get started. Check it out. So welcome to Knicks History Files. It's a new New York Got Game miniseries where we reopen the biggest cases in New York Knicks history. Every episode, we're going to dive into a different debate, unforgettable moment, legendary player, or a franchise-defining what if, examining the evidence before delivering our final verdict. So today's case is a really good one. Who was the greatest Knicks team to never, ever win an NBA championship? Now, we know this. Every great franchise has one team that fans can never stop talking about. One team that came really, really close to a championship. So today we're going to reopen the case to determine which Knicks team was truly the greatest to never win it all. So for our first edition of Knicks History Files, I'm joined by one of the biggest voices in Knicks media, Knicks content creation. You guys know him as the dean of Knicks Film School, the one and only Jonathan Macri joins me now. J-Mac, what is good, my guy?
I'm just honored that I'm on the preliminary episode of this series because, we were chatting about it a little bit before we started recording. Knicks history is my thing, and yeah. I wish I was around for more of it because a lot of it I just have to go on, the stats and like the little bit of game tape that exists. But yeah, man, it's funny. We as Knicks fans, we rag on the franchise for having, maybe not the best history considering they're one of the first franchises in the NBA. And yet it is a richer history than I think they are given credit for, which I think is an interesting and a very smart series for you to be doing.
But I love that you brought that up because that's part of why I wanted to do it. I was like, hey, we're in the off season. We've talked a lot about all the things we could talk about, and it's been a great offseason, right?
Yeah.
I didn't even address you properly. I'm supposed to say, "What's up, champ?" That's how I'm supposed to address you. That's what
likewise. What's up, champ?
That's what I'm supposed to say these days. That's what people have been saying to me out in the streets, and I like it. The love has been real. I think you make this good point. I've always been intrigued by Knicks history. I remember one of my first papers I wrote in I think it was 5th grade or middle school, was on the Knicks and the history of the Knicks, which shows you how I ended up doing what I'm doing now. But I think you're right that Knicks history sometimes is not given the credit for being as rich as it is, or how people may think of it. Now, the history's gotten better recently with them winning a championship for the first time in 53 years, but there's really good history there. And there's a lot of things that, history is funny, right? John, you know this too. There's things you could forget. There's things you might remember differently. You might not think of. You might have maybe appreciated in the same way. But yeah, hopefully through the series, people can do it. And because I know you are a history buff when it comes to the Knicks, I was like, yeah, J-Mac's got to be on the first episode.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're not getting into teams that were around, for our grandfathers, but you could go back. You could go back to the 50s. I mean, I know nobody pays attention to that era of the NBA, but this team made 3 straight finals. They didn't win any of them, obviously, but you could even. I think let's put it this way, and then we'll get into it because I think it really is the 20 or so years, give or take one really fun Knicks tape season. It's the 20 years that preceded the Leon Rose era that gave the reputation, the franchise reputation it had, because if you look before that, as we're going to get into, arguably the most stable franchise in basketball for a 15-year stretch there up until the end of the century. And then, you had pockets of teams, late 70s, mid 80s. And then before that, you had obviously the championship. So they were quite good and had a lot of really good and interesting teams, right up until 2000, 2001, around there.
Yeah, Listen, I try to say this to younger Knicks fans, like the point you just made. There's a lot of good Knicks basketball. We were fortunate to grow up through a good amount of it. So this is what I did in this conversation with me and J Mac, folks. I kept this to teams only in our lifetime. Okay, only in our lifetime that we've watched, that we remember. I kept it to that. So apologies if you watch some teams in the 80s, you want to add 70s, you want to add them into this debate, 60s, even late 60s. Fine, but I just kept it to that. That is it. So before we get into the teams, I think it's important that we talk to people about how are we going to judge this, right? How are we going to judge who is the greatest Knicks team to never win an NBA title? And you can tell me what you like, because I think there's a lot of possible criteria here, J-Man. We can look at overall talent on a team. We can look at the playoff run, because obviously these teams did not win. The competition they faced in that season, in that era of that team, if you want to talk about too, were they dominant in the regular season? Did people believe they could actually win the championship?
Yeah.
What's the historical impact that this team has left? I think that should be a factor. The eye test, how good you thought the team was. And then I guess this kind of ties in with historical impact, the legacy. Anything else you think we should add in terms of looking how we judge this?
Nothing to add. I think, because I think a couple of things you just hit on to me are connected, which is like, what was the opportunity that the team had versus what did they do with the opportunity that they were given? Like, basically, did they maximize? It's not as simple as saying like, did they maximize their talent? Because you could argue that some team that finished 500 maximized their talent. That's not what we're talking about here. But amongst this group, it's like, all Nick teams that didn't win at all have something that they could point to where they could say, oh, well, they didn't win it because of this, or they didn't win it because of that. And I'm that, to me, is the part where I'm interested to dive into, because that gets into like, well, was the thing that held them back from winning, quote unquote, their fault, or was it more something that maybe conspired against them? And you could have an alternative conversation about, well, what would their ceiling have been had this been different or that been different, and how much of that were they in control of? It gets into nuance pretty quick, which is why I think the best thing to do is just get into the conversation and we'll go from there.
Yeah, let's do it. So let's let the people know who the candidates are here. And I got to 6 teams, because we could probably pick more, but I thought 6 was a good number. And this is where we're going to go. So we have some going back, we have some recent. And what you should know is, I'll say this right off the top. I know some people out there are going to say, Dex, how did you not pick the team that J-Mac mentioned before the Leon Rose era, in the middle of that 20-year wasteland of the Knicks tape era of the Knicks in 2012, 2013. I know that's a very fond team for a lot of people. They did not make this. They did not make the cut. I'm going to let people know right now. They did not make the cut. Were you fine with that, J-Mac? Because I let you know the 6 teams. Were you okay with that?
I'm fine with it, only because you picked 6. And I think if you wanted to keep it to 6, you picked the correct 6 teams. If you were going to expand it to 7, then I think there's a good argument that would the 12-13 team would have been the 7th team. But and again, I don't want to have the discussion about a team that we're not even discussing. But one of the things you mentioned was could this team have won it all? I'm sorry, but I
didn't think so either. No,
we don't have the evidence to suggest the 12-13 team was winning it all. But I know others may disagree about that.
I happen to agree with you on that. Okay, so here are the teams. I got the 92-93 Knicks. All right, that was a bit of a painful one. I've recently wrote about that and some of the pain of that series. The 93-94 Knicks. This, for some people, and I'm sure they have a strong case, this was a team that was 1 win away. They were 1 win away from a title. Okay, the 96-97 Knicks. Very impressive team. Their season ended to the Miami Heat with the suspension, very suspension-filled series. We'll get into that. The 98-99 Knicks, improbable Knicks, one of the best runs in NBA history. Lockout shortened season, they get to the finals. The 23-24 Knicks, who I find is a very fascinating team, in the fact that this is the team before this iteration of this Knicks championship team that we just saw,
Yep.
A team that played very together, a team that injuries hurt them in the end against Indiana. And then I thought you had to put this team, the team before the team that won, the 24-25 Knicks that got to their first Eastern Conference Finals in quite some time. The last team that Tom Thibodeau coached, a J-Mac special of a team, I will say. When you look at these teams, what would you say? We're going to get into this bit by bit with these teams. What would you say were the strengths and the weaknesses of these teams? I mean, those Knicks teams early on, you think of the 92, 93, 93, 94, right? You think about the defense, you think about the physicality, right, J-Mac, with those teams led by Patrick Ewing. Yeah.
I would even extend it to the 96-97 team. It's funny, like I don't know if we want to start to really get into the nitty-gritty now, but like the 96-97 team I think has a reputation of being the team that started to add some offense to an existing core that kind of brought them up a notch, and I do think that they improved in that area, obviously with the addition of Allen Houston. But at the same time, like if you look at the statistics, like that was a team perhaps even more built on the back of their defense than the ones in the earlier part of that decade.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, and you could go all the way through to 99. It's not like that 99 team was
that was a good defensive team.
It was absolutely so. For me, the entire 90s were it was about defense, and it was about could the offense do enough, to support the defense, and ultimately the answer was no.
Yeah, that was, and obviously I think we're so much closer to the last two teams on this list, the 23-24 Knicks and the 2024-25 Knicks. Those are much better offensive teams, right?
Well, I think they're more balanced teams.
Yes, I agree with that. I think they are more balanced teams than, I'm sorry, I'm just scanning through the roster of the 23-24 team. Yeah, they're much more balanced, I would say, than most of those teams. I think I'll get to this more later. I think there's one of those teams in the 90s that was more balanced than the others, that has a strong case to this.
I agree with you, and I bet I know. I have a feeling I know which team you're going for that more balanced team. We also should say, and this is, it should go without saying, but we'll say it at the top. This is, I often say when we talk about teams in the 90s, honestly, even when we talk about teams in the early to mid 2000s, we're not even talking about a different era. We're talking about a different sport. Like, if you go back and you watch, how those games were played. I mean, you could even put on, games from go put on like a Spurs Pistons NBA Finals game from 2004 or 2005, and you'll see like the spacing on the court. We're talking, this is 20 years ago. So I think, and the reason I bring that up is to add, I think, some necessary context, which is that, we could sit here and say, oh, those 90s teams, the offense just like was never good enough. Well, back the way the sport was played then, there was kind of a ceiling to, like, there was no, pace and space. There was no 5 out. There was and none of this stuff. So, now, last several years, you need to be like there. If you're not a high echelon offensive team, it probably hurts you more than if you're not an elite defensive team. Although I guess we could get into that as we move forward with the combo.
I agree. I actually agree with that. With the nuance, I think you would agree with me on this point. I think we've actually talked about this before. The one thing I will, and then we'll really get into it. The one thing I will say about these recent Knicks teams that we've seen play, and obviously the team that won the championship this year, it is much harder to play defense and be really good defensively to me in this era of the NBA. Just because of the talent on the other side, the spacing, as you mentioned, right? You have more ground to cover defensively. Because a lot of times sometimes, I'm sure you've heard this from fans too. Oh, the defense is not like it was back in the day. And I'm like, yeah, because of the point you made. It's a completely different sport. It's a completely different sport. You're 100% right about that. And in some ways, even if you want to herald the defense of these 90s teams, I think you have to look at what's been done recently, particularly through this Knicks championship run, with how dominant they were, and actually talk about how good they were defensively, man. Like, to win a championship today, you still have to be really good defensively, and it's harder to me to play defense than it's ever been in the NBA before.
And I think even to go a step further, like, obviously I do the post games on Knicks Film School, and without fail, there are, 15, 20, 25, however many games a year over the last several years. And we're talking about teams, of the Leon Rose era that have been ranked at least respectably in defensive rankings, sometimes even higher than respectively, where you watch a certain game and fans will, and I'll listen. I'm not immune to the thinking this. It's like you watch these games and like, man, these guys, this is not championship pedigree defense. But then you watch the playoffs and you watch this playoffs especially, and you see them ratchet it up a notch or two notches or three notches, however many, and you realize it's not fair or reasonable to ask any veteran team to play the level of defense that you need to be able to play to win 4 playoff rounds. Like we saw them reach that level consistently. Unless you have a team full of guys in their early 20s, every NBA team, doesn't matter how good their personnel is going to have a certain amount of nights every year where they just, either the team that they're playing is going to hit a bunch of threes, or they're just like, they're not hitting that extra gear. And that's fine. It's just, that's the era of NBA basketball that we're in right now. And I think it's just, you have to accept it. And again, it's all part of the context of having this discussion.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. I'm glad we were able to bring some context to that. So when we look at the evidence that we're going to try to bring for these teams, right? And this is also why you were perfect for this, J Mac, because
I appreciated this part.
Yeah. This was for you, right? Like for those who don't know, J Mac, you studied law before.
I was a practicing attorney.
Practicing attorney
For I'll say the better part of 5 years. And it is a part of my life that I'm very grateful for. It imbued me with many skills that I still use to this day. It is not something I ever miss. But to go back to it and dip your toe in the water for something like this, I'm very happy.
Yeah, here we go. J Mac is dipping his toe.
That's all
in the water for this. We're all gonna be presenting evidence. Of these 6 teams, who was the best individual player?
This gets into the discussion that started, 5 minutes after the Knicks raised the Larry O'Brien trophy, or probably even before they raised the Larry O'Brien trophy, because really people have been trying to have this for the last couple of years about Brunson versus Ewing. And to me, I'll just come right out and say it, because I've said it on Knicks Film School a couple times, I think, already. Like, Jalen Brunson still trails Patrick Ewing for me in the all-time ranking of Knicks, because to me, what Ewing did over 15 years still trumps what Jalen Brunson has done over 4 years. Now, how many years is it going to take for Brunson to be here playing at something close to his level for him to catch up to Ewing? It will be 7, 8. I don't know. But that to me is not relevant to what you just asked, because if you're just talking about, again, context matters. For this discussion, where we're talking about best versus best, we're not talking about who was the better player in terms of their career. We're talking about who's the best guy. I mean this as no disrespect to Patrick Ewing, who I adore to no end.
This is making you uncomfortable. You don't want to do
it. It is making me uncomfortable, because Patrick, we're talking about one of the 75 greatest players who ever lived.
Right.
And probably still a top 50 player to this day. And, you say the word warrior, what comes to mind? It's Patrick Ewing. My answer is Brunson. I don't need to tell anybody watching this, I don't need to explain why Brunson is the answer. I mean, we just watched it play out over the course of, 2 months and really over the last 4 years.
I don't have a counter argument for that. Because you can go into all the stats of Patrick Ewing, his greatness. I agree with you. I still think he's a top 50 player. It's hard for me to not factor in that this was a guy in Jalen Brunson who's been doubted. All we heard before the playoff run, and I just did a video essay on this, about everything was a but for Jalen Brunson. Yeah. He can't do this but, his size but. Patrick Ewing, this is not to take anything away from his greatness, came up in an era of when big men dominated the game. he was a big man of that size and his skill set, and probably before Dirk Nowitzki was the best jump shooting big man
Yep.
of all time, which he should get credit for. He was a dominant big man in an era that favored big men. Now he was an elite big man, right? For Jalen Brunson to have done what he did at his size, it's hard for me to say he's not the best individual player. Now, that's again, different point. That doesn't mean I think Ewing's still a higher ranked Knick. I still have Ewing and I still have Clyde above Jalen Brunson, right? But we're talking about best individual player here in terms of like what he's been able to accomplish. Yeah, I can't go wrong with you on there.
Yeah, and it's not that Jalen Brunson has not had some real stinkers in the playoffs. You look through his playoff game log as a Knick. There's some games where the shooting just hasn't been there, and they've won despite that.
Yeah.
But when you look at the chances that in some of the biggest spots, obviously the finals being the most notable. I mean, look, we could probably just stop the conversation right there, because what he just did in the finals against the Spurs versus the one opportunity that Patrick Ewing had in the finals, I don't think that that's close. So, and again, that's we're talking about two players, irrespective of those particular years. I think the more interesting discussion is like, is there a notable difference between Ewing in 93 and 94, 97, obviously 99, he wasn't there for the end of that run. And then is there a difference in Brunson 2024 versus Brunson 2025? That gets a little more interesting, but I think, I think we're both on the same page, generally speaking, on this point.
Yeah, that is a good question you bring up. That I will say, do I think there's a difference between Ewing at the beginning of beginning of the 90s to the end of the 90s? Yes, I do. Now, some of it, people are going to look at health. Some of it is what you've been through, how you've been worn through. I also will say, I don't think you get Jalen Brunson in the 2026 playoffs without the things he went through in the 2023 and 2024 playoffs. And I might even argue, particularly the 2024, 2025 playoffs, because I don't think without the loss that Jalen Brunson went through against Indiana, particularly that game one loss that is still painful for a lot of people, although the pain shouldn't bother you now. Like, you've won the championship. I think that matters to give you the game one performance he gave you late against Cleveland. I think it matters to give you the games 1 and 2 closing performances against San Antonio, the game 5 epic performance there. Like, all this stuff matters to bring someone to that in their career, right? These things that happened before are so valuable to that. So yeah, I do think you're right about that, but that'll be interesting. Yes, okay, we both agree in terms of evidence. The best individual player is Jalen Brunson. But here's the thing. This goes to the second piece of evidence. Who had the best supporting cast? Which team had the best supporting cast around their star? And it's a little skewed, right? Because you've got 4 of these teams where Patrick Ewing is the center of this team. You could kind of take him out of the 98-99 run because
I was going to say,
of the injury, right? So then we're getting like, it's 3 teams. So if you take that team out, it's 3-2 because we have 2 Jalen Brunson teams here and the 3 Patrick Ewing teams here. When you look at the Knicks, and here's the problem. The Knicks roster in 93, 94, 92, 93 is a lot different structurally than it was in 96, 97. So let me start by saying this. I think that the 96, 97 Knicks was what I was talking about when I think it's the most balanced team of those 90s teams. I think that was the best supporting cast Patrick Ewing ever had. Hands down. Hands down, the best supporting cast that he ever had. I know people say, well, that team, they didn't go as far as 93, 94. But when you looked at what they did that offseason in the summer of 96, bringing in Allen Houston, bringing in Chris Childs, who led the team in assists, and was spending time with Charlie Ward, bringing in Buck Williams, who helped fortify that bench, Allen Houston, right? I think I mentioned Allen Houston. Allen Houston coming to the team starting, and Starks going to the bench and winning 6th man of the year. When you look at that roster, and I think you're looking at it right now, J-Mac,
I am looking at it.
That is as deep as a roster as the Knicks had in the 90s. And to me, Ewing's best supporting cast. Now, is that a better supporting cast than what Brunson had in 23, 24, 24, 25? I
So
will say, I'm going to say, I'm going to say yes. It's a little bit more balanced and it's not as good offensively. And I know the numbers prove this. In terms of, I'm pulling this up right here. I will
I
also,
have it for you.
so this, I just want to be clear on something before you get there. This 96-97 team, this was the Knicks' best offensive rating of any teams in those 90s teams. So it proves in the eye test. I think they're most balanced team. It's actually, the stats actually show they're the most best balanced team in terms of offensive rating and defensive rating. Knicks were like top 5 in defensive rating for most of the 90s.
Yes, they were.
Offensive rating, granted, different game as we talked about. This is one of the better offensive rating teams of the 90s. They finished 11th in offensive rating in 97. Your thoughts? I think this is the best supporting cast Patrick you ever had, and maybe one of the better supporting casts on the Knicks team for a start.
So it's that's interesting. We already have a statistical discrepancy here because I'm looking at the NBA.com stats page for the 96-97 season. I have the Knicks, and again, it's a 57 win team, so exceptional.
Yep, 57-25.
I have them as they have the NBA stats page has them ranked 21st in offense with an offensive rating of 102.9. Now, second best defense in the league that year, still a top 10 net rating, but offensively 102.9 offensive rating, the best team in the league that year, predictably, obviously the Chicago Bulls, second Jordan championship team, 112.4. So, but again, the Bulls were way ahead of the curve that year, and the Jazz were not far behind them.
Yep.
And then you get a little bit of a drop off. I will also just go to Basketball Reference has something, which is I always like to check in on. They have something called relative offensive rating, which basically is exactly what it sounds like. It relates your offensive rating to how far above or below league average were you. And again, for the 96-97 team, their relative offensive rating was negative 2.3, which just to contrast it to the relative defensive rating, the relative defensive rating for that team is minus 5.7. In this context, minus is good because you're allowing fewer points. So whereas their defensive rating was far out ahead of the pack, the offensive rating was like not way far behind, but also not, it was also not really close to average either. So, and then I think you get into the conversation about why that was. And I completely agree with you. Going from having Starks as a starting guard to having Houston as a starter and Starks off the bench was massive. Larry Johnson was not.
Gosh, I didn't even mention him. My bad.
And that was the other big one. And like, I will never forget the day. Incredibly excited, and because I thought we were getting, grandmama, and the guy who was making all-star teams still with the Hornets, but he was still quite good, and he adjusted his game and he became a savvy vet and the whole thing. So he was part of that starting unit along with Allen Houston, Patrick Ewing, and then obviously Chris Childs and Charles Oakley was still there. And that's the other part of it, where they hadn't yet made the Oakley for Marcus Camby trade that kind of defined the 99 team. But if you then take a step back and you're like, okay, so they had LJ, they had Oakley. So you kind of have two guys that today would be considered very clear. Like, well, I mean, guys like Oakley don't even play anymore because if you're a non-center that doesn't shoot threes, but again, talk about a different era.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm saying is like, yes, it was Ewing's best supporting cast, but I think they still had some limitations in terms of what they were able to do, even adjusting for the context of, that era.
I'm curious.
I think it was Ewing's best supporting cast, though. I will give you that.
So, J-Mac, you mentioned that you thought that this team, despite it being Ewing's best supporting cast, we both agree on that. but they were flawed in some way too. What do you think was the flaw of that 96-97 team in terms of maybe structurally how they were, the talent on their roster? What do you think the flaw? I do think there's one glaring, despite I do think it being the most balanced team, I do think there was a glaring flaw with that team that probably stopped them from being better than they were.
Well, I mean, did they ever solve the fundamental issue of giving Houston or giving Ewing, excuse me, like a proper number two, which kind of relates to when you ask about glaring flaw, like from my recollection, I mean, I was young at the time, but there were still a lot of games that just felt like a slog, to try to get enough points. And I think that related to the fact that when your best offensive player is your center and you don't really have that dynamic pick and roll partner, because even back then it was like, pick and roll was, I mean, heck, it was probably even more important back then. And I think when the fact that they didn't have that, there were just the lack of a reliable offense was just, you felt it, for me at least.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. A dynamic, probably even more so point guard, because as good as Chris Giles was off the bench in that team and led the team, it started sometimes flipping with him and Charlie Ward, led the team in assists. It was 6.1 per game. They didn't have that guard that could get downhill, that could break down the defense, right? And they didn't have Houston was just coming into his own. When you look at him, you probably
was great.
He shot well. I think he had at the time was a lot of threes. He was 148 threes that season. Look, in today's game, he'd be they would have utilized him so differently around Patrick Ewing. But that was the game then, and he wasn't unlocked in that way. So who's the team you think that had the best supporting cast out of the six? Who you going with?
I mean, for me, I think the correct answer is the 24-25 team, because that team had karl-Anthony Towns playing at he made all NBA third team. He really had a good argument for all NBA second team. You could argue that he was a top 10 NBA player in his first season as a Knick. There was nobody on any of those 90s teams that you could argue was a top 10 player. And then whether you go with 2003, 2004, or 2004, 2005, the 04-05 team had OG Anunoby for the entire year. The 03-04 team obviously had OG for part of the year.
Right.
But I think the best supporting cast argument goes to the 24-25 Knicks.
All right, so 24-25 Knicks. It's a good point with the fact that despite Ewing having the best supporting cast in 96-97, which we agree on, they do not have another top 10 player on that team. Ewing, I think, finished 9th in MVP voting that year, if I remember correctly. And yeah, Starks had a fantastic year, won Sixth Man of the Year that year. He was fantastic coming off in his first year off the bench. And Houston was really good. Just averaged 15 points, but they didn't really have that dynamic guard. I agree with you. I think 24-25, I'd give best supporting cast. Now,
yeah, but I do want to say 23-24. I want to get back to them because while I think on paper, 2024, 2025 had the better supporting cast. I'm always going to come back to the context. I think how the supporting cast works together and how it maybe just as importantly works under the coach is even more important. But we could save that maybe for the next category.
Yeah, because now we're going to talk about coaches and who had the best coach of these teams. Now, you've got Riley, who's a Hall of Famer, for the first 92, 93, 93, 94. Jeff Van Gundy for the next two, and then Tom Thibodeau for the last two that we have here. Listen, it's
Riley.
I mean, you can't
love Jeff Van Gundy here.
Yeah, I love Jeff Van Gundy. One of my favorite.
I'm a big Tom Thibodeau fan. Always was.
I thought you were going to say Tibbs, man.
No, Pat Riley is. I don't know if he's the greatest coach in the history of the sport. Probably, I mean, you probably got to give that to Pop or Phil Jackson or Red Auerbach.
Right.
Riley's Riley probably rounds out top 5. You know,
I can't
I think
disagree
that's
with that.
fair. Yeah,
You can argue he's not going to be the greatest coach in Knicks history, but his impact was crazy.
I mean, look, Red Holzman's the greatest coach in Knicks history. He's always going to be the greatest coach in Knicks history. But you know, Riley, you know, and the thing with Riley was, and this is where this is what I was kind of hinting at before. In this league, it is always either you have a coach that is adaptable to the players on the roster, or you have, you know, a coach who finds players that adapt to his style. And I think with Riley, it's funny because the way it's so funny because at the time that he came to the Knicks, Riley had this reputation as one thing. By the time Riley stopped coaching, he had a completely different reputation because he had, by that point, he had more years under his belt between Knicks coach and Heat coach than he did, I think, as Lakers coach.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and he became more of this like kind of, you know, symbol of like toughness and hard, you know, hard edge teams and everything. So, you know, but at first when he got here, I think it's fair to say he adjusted how he went about coaching to the talent that the Knicks had. And then, you know, Van Gundy kind of picked up where Riley left off and he was kind of cut from the same mold. So to me, that was just it was, you know, the perfect handing of the baton. The Tibbs part is very interesting to me because, you know, and I think there's enough evidence now to suggest the 24-25 Knicks were maybe not the ideal roster for Tom Thibodeau. Whereas the 2023-24 Knicks
were, I could see that.
Could you know, other than maybe his first Bulls team, was there a more Tibbsian roster than at least part of the 23-24 season? And again, that we've been dancing around the fact that the 23-24 team, there was actually like 3 different Knicks teams within that one season. Let's just, so for the purposes of this conversation, let's say post January 1st.
Post January, right?
You know, I don't know that we've ever seen a more Tibbs team.
I've heard you talk about this before on your shows. You've talked about how post the OG trade to the, I'm trying to remember the amount of weeks that was, 6 weeks or whatever, to the Randall injury, right? That team was as together as a team is that you like. That team really connected with you.
Well, it's funny because so the January Knicks, it was not even 4 weeks. It was January 1st to January 27th.
He right. Randall got hurt before the trade deadline. Right, I'm forgetting that.
Yes. They were 12-2. They had they had the best defense in the league. They had an outstanding offense. They actually were not first in net rating over that time. The Cleveland Cavaliers actually had a slightly higher net rating. You could even extend it out though to February 1st, which includes 3 games without Randall and OG. So the total, you know, summation of that group, 15-2, 15.1 net rating. That was the best in the league over that time. Number 1 defense and number 7 offense. But so there's the January Knicks, and those numbers are kind of beyond reproach. The team that connected with me was the post Randall team, because they were just kind of this hard fighting, you know, group that never quit, even though the record was maybe not outstanding. The reason why I think that was such a perfect, you know, Tibbsian team is, one, the OG trade turned them from a team that Tibbs could not get to defend. Here's a fun fact. In the month of December, so the month leading up to the OG trade, Do you know what the Knicks ranked league-wide in defense?
Damn, I'm trying to just go off from memory and just thinking about how I felt at the team at the time and doing shows. And obviously, I always remember you being with me when the OG trade went down.
I'll give you a hint. It wasn't good.
Yeah, I know it wasn't good. I'm going to say 19th or somewhere between 19 and 21, if I remember correctly.
Okay. You're 9 to 11 spots too high. They were dead last. For the month of December, that team, the RJ, quickly, Randall, Mitch was still healthy
it's funny.
for part of that run.
Now, as you say that, I went back and I remember talking about if they don't fix this defense. Yeah, well, I didn't. Maybe I don't remember it being that bad. Well, maybe that's the problem for me. I don't remember it being that bad. This is history,
Go look at the game log of December of that month, and they're giving up 140 points. It's every other game. It was atrocious. And then to flip that and then be the very best defense in the league, the month immediately after that showed what that trade did for them and showed how much almost overnight it turned from a team where, Tom Thibodeau, I don't think knew what to do with in terms of getting the right mix on offense, getting certainly the right mix on defense, to it made everything fall into place, which is, again, I was kind of alluding to this with the supporting cast conversation. Was that the best Knicks supporting cast? Was it the best Jalen Brunson ever was? I don't know, but that group really fit together. And, so yeah, I don't know that Tibbs has ever done a better job of coaching the Knicks than he did from January 1st until the end of that year.
I think there's an argument for sure that is one of the best coaching jobs of any Knick head coach. You could really say, when you put the context around it, right? I almost forgot how bad they were that December. But when you put that context around it and how they flipped, and yes, of course, the OG trade was a massive trade. Me, you, and CP were there, and we all loved the trade. Yep. Although I recently spoke to somebody who told me that was a trade they hated, and they were happy about how wrong they were. Now,
a lot of people didn't like that trade,
which is crazy to me. I love that trade. And obviously we did. We were jumping for joy in the SNY studios. But yeah, you're right. It's a great coaching move. Riley's the best coach. Riley's the best coach.
There's no question about that. There's no question.
I do think there's an argument that could be the best coaching job that we've seen out of these teams we've had. Which team? Go ahead. Go.
No, I'll say that we're in agreement on Riley being the best coach.
Yeah.
I think there's a good argument that Tibbs and Van Gundy both have an argument for being, let's say, top 30, 35 coaches in NBA history. Tibbs' best coaching job with the Knicks, I would argue, was what I just said, the second, post January 1st of 23-24. And then I think you have to say Van Gundy's best job coaching the team was in the 99 finals one. Yeah. So I think that's a little check in the box for 99 if you want to give him that.
Yeah, that's an incredible coaching job. You have to take context with that Van Gundy was on the hot seat. He was going to be fired. All the reporting was around that. And that man coached his ass off when it matters, right? When it mattered. That team played his ass off for him when it mattered the most. Which team do you think had, listen, it's to me, it's tough to argue against any of these 90s teams that had the toughest road because those 90s teams had to go up against Jordan. And we talked about their limitations. Does 2023, 2024, and 2024, 2025 have any argument to being a tougher road than the four teams in the 90s and what they faced?
So
I'm taking 98, 99 out of there because obviously Jordan's not there, and I don't think the road was that tough, but they did do it as an 8 seed, but it's a lockout shortened season, so take that context into it too.
So I think the most interesting argument here is 93-94. Because 93-94 is the Jordan baseball season, obviously. Mm-hmm. So he was not there for that year, and it took away. It was a Michael Jordan sized vacuum in the league that it was felt in when you watched the games. It was felt when you looked at the ratings. Certainly the ratings of the finals, which were very poor. And it's like you look at who they beat to get to the finals. and you say, all right, well, they beat a Nets team that was the only time that Kenny Anderson, Derek Coleman group, I think, got to the playoffs. I might be wrong, but maybe they made it one of the year. The Jordan-less Bulls team that almost beat them, and if it wasn't for a favorable, call,
very favorable,
very favorable
history
call.
might not look at that. Hubert Davis is happy about that all the time.
Yeah. And then an Indiana team, which was not quite there yet, they were a year away really from being ready to fully announce themselves.
But we should know, had the Knicks kind of on the ropes in the final minutes of Game 7, like that was not easy.
Exactly.
Patrick Ewing had to hit big buckets down the stretch of that game to get it done.
And you needed to go 7 games to beat an Indiana team that only had. And again, you look at that Indiana team throughout. If you go and you list all of the conference finalists of the last 50 years or something, that Pacer team in '94 would probably not rank in the top half. Let's just say that, because again, their best player, their best player. I mean, their best player was a top 75 guy, Reggie Miller. I mean, we all hate Reggie Miller, but like the guy's an all-time great player. But he was not. I don't even know if he made an All-NBA team that year. I mean, I could look it up real quick. And then, yes, they ultimately got toppled by Hakeem Olajuwon, who was a top 15 probably all-time player, at the peak of his powers. But that was also one of the only teams to win a championship without a second All-Star on it. Now the Knicks didn't have a second All-Star either, but if we're just talking here about the quality of competition, I actually don't know how high we can put the 93-94 team, which is why I'm going to make an argument for 23-24.
Wow.
And 24-25.
Okay, that's actually not where I thought you would go. Okay, go ahead. I wondered if you were going to go 92-93 just because.
Well, it's
Jordan, and they had run into him, and they had a 2-0 lead in the conference semis, and we know what happened after that.
So I think because, again, Michael Jordan's Michael Jordan, just like who's the best coach? Riley's the best coach. Michael Jordan's the greatest player of all time. 92-93, I think, is the right answer. The reason why I'm going to give a little for 24-25, let's just say off the top, like everybody thought across the league the Boston Celtics were going to repeat as champions, right?
And a good amount of us thought when the Knicks were going to draw them in the second round, and this is where context matters, everything about how the Knicks had played against the Celtics, and we also add the Cavs in that conversation, in the regular season, had everybody being like, this road, listen, at the end of that, let's just talk about it. At the end of that regular season, a lot of the Knicks fan base was disappointed and thought they were going to get bounced in the second round. A lot of Knicks fans thought that. That was a consensus thinking among fans. You kind of go into that playoffs like, okay, we'll see.
And I don't even think that that lack of confidence was dissipated all that much after the first round, because they beat the Pistons, but like that was not an impressive
series.
Yeah, but looking back, Pistons, the year after that, they go on to win 60 games. Now, we don't have to get into how real that's, but like, look, you win 60 games, you finish the top seed. All of a sudden, that first round series against the Pistons, that win looks a little bit more impressive a year later. So, and then Boston, the team that everybody thought was going to win it, they were the favorites the entire year. And then you have the Indiana team that, were it not for Tyrese Halliburton tearing his Achilles in Game 7 against the Oklahoma City Thunder, are we talking about them as NBA champions? We don't know. And you want to talk about toppling a massive competition like that Thunder team. I forget how many games they won. They won a bazillion games in the regular season, and they were, they were thought of as something of a juggernaut. And again, took them to get to 7 games. So I think if there's going to be an argument for one of the 2020s teams as having a tougher road. It is 24-25. The reason why I want to give a little love to 23-24 is because I just extolled the virtues of the Pacers. Again, the Knicks had to play the Pacers that year. But also that Sixers series, let's not forget Joel Embiid was coming off an MVP and was looking like he might march to another MVP. And then he got hurt. And then he came back late in the season and everybody was like, "Oh my God, now you're pairing him with this, fully formed version of Tyrese Maxey." And yes, they were a 7 seed, but people were like, you could, if this was the team that was there the whole season, there's no way they'd be a 7 seed. They'd be a 3 seed or a 4 seed. So I think that Sixers series was kind of gets downplayed. That was a tough series, and I thought the Sixers presented some real challenges to them. And then it took care of business. So I just want to give a little tip of the cap. That's all.
No, I like the tip of the cap. I think where you may have swayed me in your argument with the 24-25 team is your point about the Pacers.
Yeah.
Because I had to catch myself and think about how I recently just talked about the Pacers on the show, in which we were asking the question whether the current Sixers now are the biggest threat to the Knicks. And I was arguing no. And yeah, I see you have the same vibe as me.
We agree.
I do not think they are because for reasons I will not belabor, but I do not trust Joel Embiid to stay healthy or LeBron James, both of them to get through 4 rounds of the playoffs. I think a Sixers team that knows, Sixers on my mind, Pacers team that knows their identity. Part of it is a lot of us in content creation media, we might have underrated that Pacers team. You talked about how it was proven not just beating the Knicks, pushing the Thunder to 7 games, possibly could have knocked them off. The Knicks winning the Celtics, you can argue that is one of, what is that? One of the 3 or 4 Knicks' biggest series wins in the history of the franchise, in modern history, I will say. Let's at least put it
at the moment, it felt like the biggest series win, actually, inarguably, since the '99 Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah, no doubt. Right? So it's this, and we're talking about in this modern history. It's one of those. So you have that in there. Now, sure, nothing in modern history is going to beat them knocking off the Spurs this past year, right? Like that is the biggest series win in modern history because they won the title. But the fact that they had to beat the Celtics, who everybody proclaimed was going back to the championship.
Yep.
I think you make a great point about how tough that Pistons series is. Probably, I think a lot of Knicks fans will agree it's probably one of the most stressful series they had to watch.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Nothing about that series was fun.
No, I get that. And then look, the Pacers, you're always going to give the Pacers respect despite hating them, but you have to respect the way that team played. That was a Pacers team that was what? Was it 22-19 after 41 games that season?
Yeah. They were really struggling after the NBA Cup. They made it to the NBA Cup Finals, and or maybe I might be getting my years confused. I remember they had a cup hangover, but then the 24-25 team, they were around 500, and
I think it was like 2 or 3 games over.
Yeah, and then they just hit the gas.
Yeah, Halliburton just did everything started working well for them. I think when you're looking at a road, yes, you can look at 92, 93, and this is where I was probably leaning to, and it's like, yeah, listen, that was a 60-win Knicks team. At the time, was the best. They had a great season. It's one of Patrick Ewing's best seasons as a Knick. They blew a 2-0 lead. So some people look at that and say they had to play the Bulls going for their back-to-back championship in the second round. But they had the 2-0 lead. They had home court advantage. There are a lot of things that you look at that season, it's like, oh, well, it seemed like it was breaking right for the Knicks. Excuse me.
It did.
Yeah.
But
I guess what I'm asking here, J-Mac, is the toughest thing that they ran into Jordan. Some people may say that was his peak. Is that the team that ran into Jordan at his peak? And
Well,
I'm
I think
sorry,
that was
I said back to back. They were going for the three-peat that year. My bad.
yeah, I mean, look, I think Jordan I think again, hindsight's 2020. You can look at that now and say, well, what did Michael Jordan do a couple months after, you know, going down 0-2 to the Knicks?
Mhm.
He retired,
Mhm.
you know? Now we could get into conspiracy theories about whether that was actually a David Stern imposed suspension, but
Go away for a bit. Maybe.
I think you could look at that and say, they were going for three in a row, which, the further we get away from that, I think we realize how hard that is. And
Mhm.
I think them falling down 0-2 to the Knicks was more an indication of maybe Michael Jordan wasn't as, taking it as seriously as he needed to. And once they went down 0-2, people started talking. It's like, oh, really? Okay. And I'll show you just how serious of a threat. And they didn't even get to a game 7, you know? And the thing is, there were nobody got injured, right? They were up 0-2 and they were healthy the whole way. You want to talk to me about Charles Smith? You talk to me about Charles Smith and say, well, but like he was a big part of their team. So a big part of their team did not, first of all, he was put in the opportunity, put in that in that situation to have that opportunity 4 times. But like that was their big acquisition the previous summer. They went out and got him. They sought him.
Mhm.
And the fact that he did not come up big in that situation, for me, factors in how I grade that team. And again, we always go back to it. Who was the number 2 for Ewing? Like they tried to get Smith to try to fill some of that void.
He was
Obviously, he
supposed to
could
be
not
that
do
guy.
so.
Yeah.
He was supposed to be.
Mhm.
So yeah, whereas you look again, go look at 23-24. They were up 2-2, but the difference is they lost OG Anunoby at the end of game 2. So
I'd like to throw. I'm going to throw in, and this will kind of get to something I'll get to in later. 96, 97, because
are you one of those people who think they would have beat the Bulls?
I do. I
I,
do.
I've never gotten there.
I okay. Well, this is gonna factor into as we wrap this discussion. I feel that way, and I found out in an interview with Mike Breen, he feels that way too. Wasn't aware of this. Mike Breen feels this way too. This might tip my hand of where I'm going in this discussion. I think that team would have beaten the Bulls. I really do. They played them really well that season. I think all the games, if I'm not mistaken, were decided by 5 points or less.
Yeah.
They won the last game of the season, which I could still remember. I could still remember being in my parents' old apartment watching a game. John Starks hits a corner 3, 82nd game of the season. They stopped the Bulls from winning 70 games. And I was like thrilled about this, jumping for joy, thrilled about it. For me, there's something with this team, J Mac. I'm just keep it honest with you. I don't think
you're
they
not
had.
the only one.
I don't think they had the toughest road. I think it felt like they were destined to play the Bulls. We were robbed of a great conference finals, is what I will say.
Well, let's get into the last category,
Sure.
which is which team came the closest to winning it all. Again, on paper,
it's 93-94.
It's not even close.
Right.
It was they were a Elijah Wan fingertip away. So fine. Let's give it to 93-94 about how close they were.
Yep.
I'm going to sound like a broken record here. If the injuries had not happened in the 23-24 team, and this is where I'm really hanging my hat and why, and you can tell where I'm going with this. If the injuries had not happened to Randall and OG Anunoby, and you just got that team that we saw in January, the team was deep. That team made sense. They were put together. They were up 2-0 on the Pacers, even without Julius Randle. Now, if we're factoring in the part about Randall was lost for the season and he was not coming back, OG was a little different because he was at the end of a game too. Randall was not coming back, but like I don't know. I think I think injuries should factor in. And I think if you look at the fully healthy version of that team, a team that, which by the way, we saw it again for a month. There's only a month, but we saw it for a month. And that team had some serious wins. Beat the Nuggets, beat the Sixers when they were rolling, when Embiid was putting up 35 and 15 every night. They beat the Timberwolves, who made it to the conference finals that year. They beat all of these they beat the Celtics late in the year after OG came back. Against Celtics fans will tell you, the Celtics didn't care about that game. Well, the Knicks whooped up on Boston. I think it was 3 or 4 games left to go in the regular season. So they beat all comers. But injuries, they were walking wounded.
Injuries are a factor. Has to be a factor. Injuries has to be a factor. And so we could talk about that 23-24 team having a tough road. We could talk about them being close. Were they close to winning it all?
If Neesmith's shot does not go down,
yeah,
at the end of game 3,
I think the Knicks are winning that series. I do. I think the Knicks were the better team if healthy in that series. I believe.
And so let's say Neesmith's shot doesn't go down. They beat that. They win that series. Let's say they win it in 6.
Mm-hmm.
OG gets a little extra rest. We know the Knicks were capable of beating Boston. They beat them the next year. Again, I know they didn't have Randall. I think that this is probably my hottest take that I've had over the last however many years. I think that Knicks team would have given that Boston team a run for their money.
I was saying that. I don't know. This is going to sound weird, but I'm going to say. I'm trying to remember how I felt about it. I did feel the Knicks team could give Boston a run for their money. I did. And in some ways, you felt better about the 23-24 team playing Boston than you did about the 24-25 team playing Boston heading into those respective series. I think a lot of people would agree with that. So I see what you're saying. What I wanted to say was if injuries are a factor, how much do we put other things that happen in the playoffs as a factor? Suspensions, like in 96, 97. Which to me, J-Mac, you're not going to convince me.
That's fine.
Okay, maybe you will.
That's fine.
I do not believe. Now listen, the letter of the law is the letter of the law. Nick shouldn't have left the bench, all the other good stuff.
No.
If PJ Brown does not flip over Charlie Ward and the whole stuff happens, do you think the Knicks were losing that series? I do not.
I'm just going to say, okay. So you think they had a chance of beating the Bulls?
I do. I feel the way you felt in 23-24. I think they would have gave the Bulls a run for their money. I think that series was going 7.
Are you 100% sure they were beating the Jazz? Because I think the 23-24 Knicks have a better shot of beating Luka and Kyrie than the 96-97 Knicks have of beating.
This is good.
Karl Malone and the Utah Jazz. Because that Jazz team, look, Karl Malone it gets, and somewhat
for a good reason.
Yeah, he gets crapped on more than any great NBA player. I mean, the guy's 3rd leading scorer of all time, or whatever the heck he is. Yeah, he gets crapped on. But I'm pulling it up right now. That Utah team, 96-97 Utah Jazz. 64-18. And there's a stat. I didn't even mention this. Another great Basketball Reference is like a wealth of information. It has this stat SRS, which is basically grades you out not only against other teams in the league that year, but teams basically kind of. It's a stat you could every team throughout history is attributed. They had an SRS of 7.97, which to give you a little bit of context, the Knicks in all of their history have had an SRS of, what did I just say? 7.97?
7.97. Yep.
They've only had an SRS that high once in their entire history, the 1969-70 championship team.
What do you know what the Knicks were that year? Their SRS in 96-97.
Oh, in 96-97?
Yeah.
Their SRS was, hold on, I gotta go down here a little bit.
Just trying to see what
3.31.
So they weren't in the same ballpark as the Jazz in terms of that.
Yeah.
In
So
terms of that
again,
rating.
just to give context, so we're all everybody's on the same page. The Bulls had the best SRS in the league that year. It was 10.7, which should not surprise anybody because that you could argue even that second Bulls team was one of the 5 or 6 greatest teams of all time. They won 69 games, as you alluded to before. 10.7. Jazz SRS, I said 7.97. Third best team, Sonics, 57 and 25, 6.91 SRS. Fourth best SRS, Miami Heat, 5.56.
Well, hold on. Hold that right there, sir. They had the fourth best SRS, and the Knicks were dominating them 3-1 in that series.
You're right. They were.
And
I'm just saying, everybody says, oh, if special didn't happen, they would have had a shot against the Bulls. Okay. Even if we say they're going to beat, again, I just gave you the Bulls SRS. Yeah. Even if we say they're going to take down maybe the second greatest Jordan team ever, it doesn't automatically mean that they were going to win the next round. I just throw that out.
That's fair, and I do think your point. I do think your point about whether the Knicks would. Do I think the Knicks 23-24 team could have beat the Mavs team? Yes, I do. I do.
There's not a
and I understand why you
in my mind.
I don't disagree with you on that. Do I think the Knicks could have beat the Jazz? I do.
I mean, would have, but
am I incredibly confident in it? No. But the way the team was playing, the way they played, it's almost this thing like for people young out there, if you didn't see it, that Knicks team played really well. They started off the season. I think they won 8 of the first 10 games. They were 34-14 at the All-Star break. They closed the season really strong, including that win over the Bulls. Just looked it up. 2-point win at the United Center. They stopped them from winning 70 games. I mean, little did I know that would have been probably the highlight of that season for young Dexter rooting for the Knicks. But I don't. There was something about watching that team, J-Mac, that I can't. Maybe you didn't feel the same way, but there's something to tell me they had closed the gap to me enough with the Bulls, and I think a lot of it had to do with the depth, the shooting of Allen Houston that season, Starks going to the bench. They were just deeper. They still were not great offensively. They were just. I trusted the offense more in the playoffs. That's probably the holdback. That's the holdback for you that just weren't good enough offensively.
But that's the thing I keep coming back to. The Jazz that year, the Jazz and the Bulls were the two best offenses in the league that year,
and ended up playing in the finals.
And they ended up playing in the finals, and it was a good finals. Didn't go to a game 7, but it was good finals. Both of those teams scored 103 points per game, 103.1 to be exact. The Knicks were at 95.4. So I'm sorry to be a broken record, but like when your best player is a guy that you can't really run your offense through in terms of Patrick Ewing, and ultimately you need to rely on all of those ancillary pieces. And you brought up Buck Williams before. Buck Williams has an argument for being the greatest player in the history of the sport that's not in the Hall of Fame. He was awesome. He was also much older by that point in his career.
Yes.
Long past his all-star days. And again, it's like he reinforced an existing strength in terms of that toughness, defense, all that good stuff that we love. But it's not like he addressed a weakness. They didn't really start addressing weaknesses until they brought in Sprewell. And by that point, unfortunately, it was too late because then Ewing was too far
gone.
Past
he was on the downside. Yeah.
He was on the downside. So that's why I just, when you yes, you got to defend if you're going to beat Michael Jordan, and you would have had to defend if you were going to try to beat, that Jazz team. But you also got to be able to put the ball in the basket. And it was still, as much as they improved, it was still a bit of a slog.
I agree. It's to me, maybe that's why it's a special place for me. They're the most balanced team of the Ewing era, and I think
Yeah.
the potential of that balance was robbed from them because of the suspensions. And there's a world in which I look at it, and I know we agreed at 93, 94 is the answer because they literally were a game away.
And could we say one other thing? And
Yeah,
I
of
think
course,
there's
man. Of course.
there's a guy that we've been talking for however long we've been talking, and we've not brought up his name. Derek Harper was on the 93, 94 team.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I brought it up how 3 or 4 times about how it didn't have the second guy, didn't have the second guy. Derek Harper's like not an all-time great player. I don't did he probably averaged 20 points a game once or twice in his career, but like earlier in his career when he was with the Mavs.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But during that playoff run and in particular in that NBA finals, he was every bit the part of like it's certainly good enough point guard to win you an NBA championship, but it wasn't quite enough.
And hit some big time shots during that playoff run. Big time shots during that playoff.
I've listened. It's not really in dispute. He if they won it, I think he would have been Finals MVP.
Yep.
So yeah, I before we actually made our pick, I wanted to just say his name.
All right, so okay, here we go. We're gonna get through this really quickly because we've gone even longer than I thought, but this has been a fascinating conversation because J Mac is a Knicks history buff like myself, and we can talk about this all day. Okay, let's start eliminating teams. Let's get down to who's gonna be our final teams. What are the teams you're taking off? Just they got gone. You're getting down to your final team. Who you crossing off? Who's got to go?
So the funny thing here is I think we got to take off one of the finals teams. I think we got to take off 99. And because I think when you look at how many times they've come up in this discussion, another guy that we haven't really discussed that much is Latrell Sprewell. Sprewell was awesome, but they needed him a couple years earlier because, again, by the time he got here, Ewing was just, Ewing didn't even play past game 2 of the Pacers series. It's crazy that that's the first team we have to eliminate because they're probably my favorite all-time Knicks team up until the last couple of years. But I would say let's eliminate them.
Understood why it's your favorite team. Incredible run. Incredible run. But yeah, I just 8 seed lockout shortened season. I know I'm talking against myself. We talked about the outstanding coaching job by Jeff Van Gundy, but yeah, this also they got to the finals and they didn't have Ewing at all, and obviously he wasn't healthy after tearing the Achilles. And yeah, I agree. They've got it. They've got to go. It's a great run. They're a great run, and they're always going to have a special place in the heart of Knicks fans. But you got to take them off too. I'm with you on that.
I would also propose.
I know what you want to do.
I feel like one of the 92, 93 or 93, 94 teams need to go. But I also feel like you could argue that they are the top 2. I'm not about to argue that 96, 97 should go. So let's get rid of one of the 2 recent teams.
I'm going to say let's take off 92, 93 because of the word.
Really?
Yeah. And the reason I'm going to say that is because, and listen, I hate talking about this because this person, you talked about how they went and tried to get Charles Smith off season before, and Charles Smith is a good friend and Pitt alum, but he disappointed in that series, and it's hard to put them as the greatest team that ever won when they blew it with major expectations and having a 2-0 lead against the Bulls. It's hard to do that.
Just a couple really quick stats.
Sure.
Those 2 numbers I mentioned earlier, relative defensive rating and relative offensive rating.
Relative offensive rating, yep.
By relative defensive rating, the 92-93 Knicks are the greatest defensive Knicks team of all time, and I haven't cross-checked this with every other team in history, but looking at the number, the minus 8.3, which is just ridiculous. They probably have an argument for not one of the greatest defensive teams of all time, but like one of the greatest defensive teams of all time that did not win a championship. That being said,
Yep.
their relative offensive rating
Not good.
was negative 1.9. The relative offensive rating of the 93-94 team, negative 0.6. So again, we're splitting hairs here. And the relative, by the way, the relative defensive rating of the 93-94 team, negative 8.1. So neck and neck with 92-93. They were just a better offensive team, which, by the way, a couple of all-stars on that 93-94 team.
3 all-stars.
Charles Oakley.
Yep.
92-93 didn't have that. I know they won 60 games. I'm with you. Let's get rid of 92-93.
Fair. Okay. Where are you going?
We got to get rid of one of the recent teams.
So it's so hard. It's so hard to do this, but you have really swayed me. This is the lawyer Macri that swayed me here. You made such a compelling case about 23-24. And it's a great point. I think they would have beat the Mavericks. I do agree with you on that. I think you have to take it out of 24-25. If I'm going to say disappointment for 92-93, then we have to talk about the high of beating Boston and the low that came in game 1 against the Pacers, right? We had, and it, look, there's no way to cut that. It was disappointing. I think a lot of Knicks fans and even me, Knicks are going to the finals. They're going to beat this. I still think to this day they were better than the Pacers team. The Pacers beat them. It is what it is. The Knicks ended up winning the next year, but it's disappointing. It was the first year with Cat. Yeah, they got to get chopped. I got to chop them off.
Game 1,
because they have an iconic series win. It's tough. They have an iconic series win over Boston.
It is an iconic series win. It had every one of the wins against Boston. You could argue, as among the greatest Knick playoff wins of the modern era. It wasn't just that they lost game 1 in the way they did to the Pacers. They followed that up with such a dud in game 2. And I know the final score in game 2 was kind of close. I think it was a single-digit loss. It ended up being. It was a game in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
Game 1 did not need to define them. It ended up, unfortunately, defining them. And then, obviously, we had the starting lineup change, and that eventually led to Tibbs' ouster. It was just, for a team that made it to the conference finals and won a bunch of games and had 2 All-NBA players and the whole thing, that 2004 24-25 experience was filled with quite a bit of unpleasantness, I'll just say. So I am also comfortable eliminating. So we're down to 3.
Okay.
94.
Right. Yep.
97, and then my beloved 23-24.
I'm gonna say this right here. And I understand. I think we're both gonna be in agreement on this. I understand people are going to think this is crazy. And I understand that they are the closest of these teams to winning a championship.
So you want to take off 93-94?
I do. Which I do. I do.
But here, Dex, hold on.
Yeah, sure.
Michael Jordan was wearing cleats. Right?
Yeah.
Michael Jordan was wearing cleats. Who was the second best player in the league that year or who was the best player in the league that year that Michael Jordan was out?
Hakeem.
It was Hakeem Olajuwon. I know. Yeah. Yes. There's no.
And I think he's sometimes criminally underrated, how people talk about him as one of the greatest players of all time. But yes.
Okay. So Hakeem Olajuwon was the best player in the league that year. How did they do against Hakeem Olajuwon?
You talking about in regular season?
No, I'm talking about 93-94 when push came to shove in the NBA Finals.
Oh, in the NBA Finals.
How did they do against Hakeem Olajuwon?
Oh, well, they lost. They lost 4-3. And hold on. And in disappointing fashion, this is part of the context. They had a 3-2 lead in that series and did not finish.
They could not do anything
to stop him. No, they could not stop him.
And then you look at the rest of like the MVP ballot for that year, for instance. Mm-hmm. Like David Robinson was number 2. They didn't have to go through him.
Who
Scotty,
who of note, David
yeah.
Robinson, you mentioned, of note, Hakeem Olajuwon gave him the business
Oh,
during that playoff run.
yeah, that's why it wasn't just Ewing. It
Yeah.
was it
Oh no,
was
he's
it
giving
was
everybody that work.
he was
Yeah.
giving everybody the business.
Yeah.
Third in MVP voting that year, notably, Scottie Pippen,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
who the Knicks did defeat, although you could argue that Scottie Pippen's own implosion maybe aided that series win, which
Yep.
again, that was a game the Bulls won with the chair throwing incident. But like, fourth, Shaquille O'Neal. They did not have to face Shaquille O'Neal. Fifth, Patrick Ewing. Shout out to our guy.
Mm-hmm.
Sixth, Gary Payton. Didn't have to face Payton. Seventh, Sean Kemp, Karl Malone tied for seventh. Didn't have to face either of those guys. So like all of your best players in the league that year, basically, were in the West, or the vast majority of them were in the West, and they all beat each other up, and you had this Knicks team that had to go through again a not great New Jersey team, Bulls team missing Michael Jordan, and then like I mentioned, the Pacers that did a single Pacer get not a single Pacer got one vote, not one measly vote for MVP that year.
So so hold on. Are you saying what I think you might be saying, which I feel like is supporting the argument to knock off 93, 94, that they really didn't have that tough of a road?
Reggie Miller did not make the All-Star team that year.
So the Knicks, so what you're saying is that Knicks team had a easy road to get there and then get the job done.
If we're sitting here and we're saying, and people are watching this and listening to this and they're saying, you guys are freaking nuts that the team that was a fingertip away from winning it all, you're saying was not even one of the top two teams of the last 40 whatever years. I think when you look at who they actually came up against to get to Game 7 of the finals. Now, if you want to tell me they were a fingertip away from beating Hakeem, that is the more persuasive part of it.
But I think the point that you're making here is the right one. And I think that's why I'm willing to chop him. Because I do listen, there was so much discussion about this with 2026 Knicks and who they played and what your path is and all the stuff. But like, okay, if you have and I'm doing air quotes if you're listening, the easy path, well, then you got to take care of the business. And to some reason, you could argue that of all these teams, 92, 93 are probably up there too, that was maybe the most disappointing team because of what you just mentioned, because Jordan being out the league. And this is not me throwing shade at Hakeem, because I think Hakeem is one of the dopest players ever. But because of everything that you just mentioned, and the Knicks didn't have to face many all NBA level players and all-stars or MVP candidates, the top players in the league were all out West, except for Patrick Ewing. Right? So that's why I think if people listen to what you just said and what we're saying here and don't take the shock value and say, well, they played in the Game 7. They were a fingertip away in Game 6. They were a bad John Starks shooting performance away 2 for 18. And we obviously then learned John Starks had dealt with the death of his grandfather and all that. But you can argue they're the most disappointing team of the 6.
I mean, Greg Anthony was the 7th man on that team.
But see, now we're cooking.
Greg Anthony stinks. Sorry,
J Mac. Now we're talking about this. Now we're cooking with nuance. You're looking at the whole totality of it, which is what I was trying to do in this conversation. It's the road, it's the team, it's the star power, it's the supporting cast, it's everything. And for me, I am rocking with you on this. And this is why 93, 94 is to get up out of here. We got to get them up out of here. And yes, so we're getting up out of here. This brings us down. This brings it down to the two teams that we're going. I know what side I'm on here, so I'm going to talk. I'm on the 96, 97 side. And J-Mac, we know you're on the 23, 24 side. Here. We know it.
Look.
Give me your last. What's the last case you got for this?
I think I made my last case already, which is that it's the when healthy argument. Look, you want to know my closing argument? Here it is.
Here we go.
It's biased. It's biased. But I was in the building for the last win that team had, the 23-24 team. It was game 5 against the Pacers. When they were coming off, it was the heartbreaking game 3 loss because of the Nemhart shot, and then a Mother's Day game. Pretty sure it was Mother's Day. It was definitely a Sunday.
It was.
Yeah, it was Mother's Day. Where they, oh my God, to say they got taken out behind the woodshed, and that it was gnarly. What happened to them to get, so they went from up 2-0 to 2-2. They looked dead in the water. Again, OG was hurt. Randall was still out. Bogdanovich by that point was done. Mitchell Robinson done. Like literally half their team done. And they went out in game 5 against Pacers and they put on a rock concert in Madison Square Garden, and they just absolutely blitzed a team that had all the momentum in the world, and they did it with nothing but, grit, determination, fire, desire, whatever Clydeism you want to use. So why do I bring this up? I bring this up because that team had something special about them, a no quit attitude, a never say die attitude. A game I frequently bring up or have brought up over the years is a game where in March of that year, where Jalen Brunson got hurt 47 seconds into the game. In Cleveland. Yep. Deuce McBride came in the first minute, didn't sit down the rest of the game, played 47 minutes and 13 seconds, I think it was. And they won. And that was just who that team was. Didn't matter who was down, didn't matter. Precious Chua needs to play 40 minutes, whatever the case may be. They always, whatever they had to give, they gave. And that certain extra something, I feel is if we're doing the what if, like they get the injury what if, 96-97 gets the suspension what if. So if those two cancel each other out, the little extra plus the Brunson factor for me gives the 23-24 team the edge, but I understand that is a vast minority opinion.
We're going to find out how vast of a minority opinion this is. This will be my closing argument. I love J-Mac's closing argument. I love that J-Mac loves the 23-24 Knicks like nobody else does. I absolutely love it. I think it's so dope. And I understand that when people watch this episode or listen to this episode, they're going to be like, J-Mac and Dex are crazy. Because they're going to say, the 93 Knicks won the most games out of any of these teams. The 94 Knicks came the closest. They were a win away. They were a Hakeem Olajuwon fingertip away. My argument for 97 is I think it was the best talent, despite his shortcomings, that surrounded Patrick Ewing. I think it was the deepest team that Patrick Ewing played on. I think it was, for that era of basketball, the most complete team that he had around him. The problem for me is injuries, as J-Mac mentioned for the 23-24 team, robbed them of a championship opportunity. To me, suspensions robbed this team of a championship opportunity. I wish I could have got to see that team play against the Bulls. It's just how, and I looked this up, and all the games that year were decided by 4 points or less. I said 5 earlier. 4 points or less. They were dominating the Heat. I get it. Was it the perfect team? No, it was not. But if you kind of look at that roster, it's better than 92-93. Not defensively, or 93-94. Not better than those teams defensively, but it was more balanced. And I think that matters a ton for me. And I think it's the best team of the 90s group that we really didn't get to see compete against Jordan's Bulls. And so that's, for me, why they are the greatest Knicks team to never win a championship. It's because we were robbed of even seeing them in the conference finals against the great Bulls.
if we are making it between these two teams,
Yeah.
what what carries more weight for you?
Let me hear
The
this.
fact that Charlie Ward was a very prominent player, and I love Charlie Ward, but look, a very prominent player on the 96-97 team, or the fact that Precious Achiuwa was a very prominent player on the 2023-24 team.
Yo, we're about to slander somebody else after you slandered Greg Anthony up in here. Oh, what holds more?
Those guys were just being asked to do a little bit more than they were.
They
They were
were, but I'm
capable of.
actually going to say that Charlie Ward probably did better in his role, although him ending up getting flipped is probably not the best.
I'm looking at his playoff stats, Dex. You might want to rethink that argument.
No, give it to me. Give.
Do you really want to know?
I do want to know.
In the playoffs, in 20 minutes a game, Charlie Ward shot a little under 30% from the field, which even back then was no bueno. He scored 2.2 points per game. Did have 4.3 assists per game. So there was that.
Chris Childs was the better point guard in that team that year. I remember that being clear.
There was that year he was,
yeah.
and he actually the here. You know what? This goes towards your argument. The 5 most prominent, well, 5 of the 6 most prominent Knicks: Ewing, Houston, Starks, LJ, and Childs. All of those guys shot well in the postseason. Oakley was only guy who didn't have a really good shooting postseason. Those other guys, you want to talk about Larry Johnson shot the heck out of the ball.
They were
in the playoffs.
J-Mac, I don't think that could be understated. Up to 3, they were rolling. They were playing really well. They swept Charlotte this series. They looked. I know that Charlotte team just had Glenn Rice and Mourning and guys, but excuse me, not Mourning. Glenn Rice and guys. Mourning had been left, but
no, don't skirt past that. They swept them. That was a 54-win
Charlotte Hornets team.
Team.
Yeah, they were playing good. It's one of those things like go back and look at how they played toward the end of the season. It's kind of like what your point about the 23-24 Knicks. I think we're almost a little bit on the same page of different things. There was something about the way those teams were playing that inspired a confidence. It's like it's almost a little game recognized game here. I see what you're saying there. We can go. But here's the thing. We've gone well enough into this episode. It's been a fantastic discussion. We don't have a judge here. So unfortunately, we don't have that. We've made our cases to you, the people. We're going to leave it to you in the comments to let us know, what do you think the greatest team of all time? Is it the 23-24 Knicks? Is it the 96-97 Knicks? Are we tripping? And it's neither of those teams, one of the other 4 teams that we've mentioned. Let us know. I think you made a good case, J-Mac. I appreciate you.
The best part about
I don't think I could out-lawyer you. I don't think that's possible.
The best part about this to me
is
that you can make arguments not only for any 6 of these teams. I think there will be people that will make arguments for 2012-13.
That'd be an interesting one. We'd been here all day if we added some more teams, but it'll be interesting. I'm sure somebody will say it in the comments. I'm sure. J-Mac, this has been a pleasure, man. I appreciate you. I know you just got back from vacation to do this with me. It'll always be remembered you were the first guest. I mean, you've been a guest on the show many times, but for this mini-series, Knicks History Files, you were the first guest, and it was the perfect person for this topic. And I have some more. We have some more good topics coming up for people that I think they're going to enjoy, including, I'll tease one already. One is going to be, what are some of the biggest what ifs in Knicks history? And we've kind of touched.
I love it.
We've kind of touched upon some of them. There's some other good ones, so it's good. So J-Mac, man, I gotta thank you. You made a compelling case. I mean, we knew you were gonna pick 23-24 because we know how much you love Tibbs.
You know what? That team wasn't even about Tibbs for me. That was about. I'm always gonna think of 4 guys: Jalen Brunson, Josh Hart, Dante DiVincenzo, and Isaiah Hartenstein.
Yeah, that team had something special. I get that. And I think sometimes, I think the point of this, I hope everybody takes this when we wrap, even when teams don't win, right? We know how special this 2026 team is. That's going to be forever for a lot of Knicks fans. But even when teams don't win, the beauty of history and beauty of sports and following it and doing what we do, these things stay with you. And sometimes you look at the stats, sometimes you didn't realize Charlie Ward shot as bad as he did, or this player played as good as he did, or who they had to face. But that's the beauty of talking about history, man. That's the beauty of sports. We get to talk about all this. Pretty cool. Appreciate you, brother.
Appreciate you, man. Always a pleasure to come on. And again, honored to be the first one in the series, and looking forward to catching the rest of it throughout the rest of the summer.
Yeah, we'll do more. You'll definitely be back for something else for sure. No doubt about that. That is Jonathan Macri, the Dean of Knicks Film School. Check him out there. I'm Dexter Henry. That's going to do it for this edition of New York Got Game and Knicks History Files. We hope to catch you the next time. Everybody, peace.
And thanks for watching New York Got Game.